He retired more times than most wrestlers ever laced up their boots. He pile-drove Ric Flair through a table before table spots were even a thing. He won death matches in Japan involving exploding barbed wire, ring bombs, and more blood than a slaughterhouse. He held the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, the ECW World Heavyweight Championship, and enough territorial gold to fill a truck. And when the dementia finally took his mind in his late 70s, the wrestling world did not just lose a legend. It lost the toughest, craziest, most stubbornly unkillable son of a gun who ever stepped between the ropes. Terry Funk was not just a wrestler. He was professional wrestling itself, stretched across 5 decades and every conceivable style the business has ever produced. This is his story. Terrence D. Funk was born on June 30th, 1944 in Hammond, Indiana. He was not, despite what the cowboy boots and the West Texas drawl would have you believe, actually born in Texas. But Texas is where the Funk family put down roots, and Texas is where Terry Funk became who he was. After World War II, his father, Dory Funk Sr., moved the family to Amarillo in the Texas Panhandle. Dory Sr. was a Navy veteran who had transitioned into professional wrestling after the war, and he eventually became the promoter of the Amarillo territory, running a promotion called Western States Sports. The Amarillo territory was rough, remote, and unforgiving, stretching from the Panhandle down to El Paso and out into parts of Oklahoma and New Mexico. It was cowboy country in the truest sense, and the wrestling that came out of it reflected the land and the people who lived there. Hard, honest, no frills. Terry grew up in this world alongside his older brother, Dory Funk Jr. The two boys watched their father wrestle and promote, absorbing the business from the ground up. Their childhood friends included other sons of wrestlers, most notably Dick Murdoch, whose stepfather, Frankie Hill Murdoch, competed on the same Texas cards as Dory Sr. These boys did not just grow up around wrestling. They grew up inside it. The ring was their backyard. The locker room was their living room. The business was in their blood before they ever had a choice in the matter. After graduating from Canyon High School, Terry attended West Texas State University, where he competed in both amateur wrestling and football. West Texas State had an almost supernatural reputation for producing professional wrestlers. The list of grapplers who attended the school reads like a hall of fame by itself, including Dory Jr., Dick Murdoch, Stan Hansen, Bruiser Brody, Tully Blanchard, Dusty Rhodes, and many others. It was a breeding ground for toughness, and Terry Funk was one of its finest products. Terry made his professional wrestling debut on December 9th, 1965, in Amarillo, defeating Sputnik Monroe. It was a fitting start to what would become one of the longest and most storied careers in wrestling history. Working in his father's promotion, Terry and his brother Dory quickly rose through the ranks, becoming top draws in the territory by the end of the decade. The brothers were a formidable tag team, but Terry also carved out his own identity as a singles competitor with a personality that set him apart from his more technically oriented brother. Where Dory Jr. was methodical and precise, Terry was wild and emotional. He had an intensity that bordered on insanity, a willingness to take punishment that seemed almost masochistic, and a gift for connecting with audiences on a gut level that few wrestlers in history have ever matched. Terry won his first singles championship in 1970, capturing the NWA Western States Heavyweight Championship, a title he would go on to win 10 times over the next 5 years. He was clearly the dominant wrestler in the region, a man who could work a crowd of roughneck oil workers and ranchers into a frenzy with nothing more than his words and his fists. His brawling style was perfectly suited to the Amarillo territory, where fancy technical wrestling took a back seat to raw toughness and the ability to make a crowd believe that what they were watching was real. Terry Funk could do that better than almost anyone. The Funk brothers also began making trips to Japan early in their careers, first wrestling for the Japan Wrestling Association in 1971. On December 7, 1971, the Funks defeated Giant Baba and Antonio Inoki for the NWA International Tag Team Championship in Sapporo. It was the start of a relationship with Japanese wrestling that would define both brothers' careers for decades to come. When Baba left the JWA to form All Japan Pro Wrestling, the Funks followed, and AJPW became their Japanese home for years to come. The Funk family's dominance of the NWA reached its peak in the 1970s. Dory Jr. had already held the NWA World Heavyweight Championship for an incredible 1,563 days, before losing it to Harley Race in May 1973. Race served as a transitional champion, dropping the belt to Jack Brisco 2 months later. Brisco held the title for the next 2 years, and when it came time to choose his successor, the NWA board voted on Terry Funk. It was a razor-thin decision, reportedly 4-3 in Terry's favor over Harley Race, and it was Dory Jr.'s advocacy that helped tip the scales. On December 10, 1975, Terry Funk defeated Jack Brisco for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship in Miami, with an inside cradle. Interestingly, it was Dory Jr. who had been originally scheduled for the title shot that night, but he was unable to make it, and Terry stepped in to create one of the most legendary moments of his career. The Funks became the first and only brothers to both hold the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, a distinction that remains unique to this day. Being the NWA World Champion in the 1970s was not like holding a title in a single promotion. The NWA Champion was expected to travel to every member territory, defend the belt against the top challenger in each region, and put on matches that made money for the local promoter while keeping the championship prestigious. It was an exhausting, grueling lifestyle that kept the champion on the road virtually every single day of the year. Terry Funk embraced it completely. His title reign lasted 424 days, during which he defended the belt against a who's who of professional wrestling, including Jack Brisco in rematches, Dusty Rhodes, Giant Baba, Pat O'Connor, Billy Robinson, Wahoo McDaniel, Abdullah the Butcher, Dick Murdoch, and many more. He defended the championship across North America, Japan, Australia, and Singapore, logging more miles than perhaps any traveling champion before him. His first year as champion reportedly earned him $400,000, an enormous sum for a professional wrestler in the mid-1970s. The schedule was relentless, but Funk carried the belt with a pride and a sense of responsibility that earned him the respect of every promoter and every locker room he entered. The reign ended on February 6, 1977, in Toronto at Maple Leaf Gardens, when Harley Race defeated Funk using an Indian death leg lock. The same Harley Race who had ended Dory Jr.'s reign 4 years earlier now ended Terry's. It was a passing of the torch that set the stage for the next era of NWA Championship Wrestling. After losing the world title, Funk continued to be one of the top draws in the business. He engaged in a legendary feud with Dusty Rhodes throughout the late 1970s that filled arenas across Texas, Florida, and the southern United States. The two men were both phenomenal talkers and vicious brawlers, and their bull rope matches and Texas death matches became the stuff of legend in every territory where they were booked. Funk and Rhodes had a chemistry born of mutual respect and a shared understanding of what made professional wrestling work at its most primal level. They knew how to make people care, how to make people angry, and how to make people pay money to see them fight again. Their feud was one of the defining rivalries of the late 1970s NWA landscape. Funk also feuded with Jerry Lawler in the Continental Wrestling Association in 1981, producing one of the most innovative matches in wrestling history. An empty arena match at the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis that is still talked about and studied to this day. The concept was simple but revolutionary. No crowd, no noise, just two men fighting in an empty building with only a camera crew to document the violence. It was raw, it was intimate, and it was years ahead of its time. The empty arena match has been recreated many times since, but Funk and Lawler did it first, and arguably no one has ever done it better. By 1980, Western States sports, the Funk family's Amarillo territory, was beginning to decline. Ticket sales were dropping, and the economics of running a small territory were becoming increasingly difficult. The Funk brothers eventually sold the promotion to Blackjack Mulligan and Dick Murdoch for $20,000, closing a chapter of family history that had defined their lives. But losing the territory did not slow Terry down. If anything, it freed him to become the ultimate journeyman, a man without a home territory who could walk into any promotion in the world and instantly become one of its biggest attractions. In Japan, the Funks continued to build their legend throughout the late 1970s and into the 1980s. They competed in All Japan Pro Wrestling's prestigious tag team tournament, originally called the Open Tag League, and later renamed the Real World Tag League, which became one of the premier events in all of professional wrestling. The Funks won the tournament 3 times, in 1977, 1979, and 1982. Establishing themselves as one of the greatest tag teams in the history of Japanese wrestling. Initially arriving in All Japan Pro Wrestling as foreign heels, the Funks feuded primarily with Giant Baba and Jumbo Tsuruta. Terry defended his NWA World Championship against Tsuruta on June 11, 1976, in a classic encounter at Kuramae Kokugikan in Tokyo that is considered one of his finest title defenses on tape. But it was in 1977 that the Funk's trajectory in Japan changed forever. They began feuding with Abdullah the Butcher and the Sheik, 2 of the most violent and feared brawlers in wrestling history. These matches were absolute bloodbaths, among the most brutal tag team encounters ever witnessed. The feud peaked on December 13, 1979, in a real-world tag league clash that many consider the best match of Terry Funk's entire career. Through their willingness to endure unthinkable violence in defense of their honor, the Funks, and especially Terry, became 2 of the first foreign babyfaces to achieve mainstream popularity in Japan. It was a remarkable achievement in a culture that typically cast foreigners as villains, and it spoke to the genuine emotion and authenticity that Terry Funk brought to every performance. Japanese fans did not just respect Terry Funk, they loved him. In the 1980s, the Funk's primary rivals in All Japan shifted to Stan Hansen and his various tag partners, most notably Bruiser Brody and later Terry Gordy. These feuds produced incredible matches full of violence, intensity, and real emotion. It was during this era, on August 31, 1983, after a bloody and hard-fought victory against Hansen and Brody, that Terry Funk announced his first retirement. The crowd in the arena wept. Terry Funk was done. Except, of course, he was not done. He was never done. That first retirement would become the template for what became one of the most enduring running jokes in professional wrestling. Terry Funk retired more times than anyone can accurately count. Estimates range from 7 to more than a dozen, depending on how you define retirement. Each time he walked away, the emotion was real, the tears were real, the farewell speeches were real. And each time he came back, the pull of the ring was stronger than whatever promise he had made to himself and his family. It was both his greatest strength and his greatest weakness. A love for the business so deep and so consuming that he simply could not let it go. No matter how much his body begged him to stop, no matter how many times his wife Vicky asked him to stay home, no matter how many times he told himself this was truly the last time. The retirements became such a well-known part of his character that even other wrestlers joked about it. But there was something deeply poignant about them too. Terry Funk was not just addicted to wrestling, he was addicted to the feeling of being alive that the ring gave him. Without it, he was just a middle-aged man from Texas with bad knees and a bad back. With it, he was Terry Funk, and Terry Funk could do anything. During his first retirement, Funk pursued a career in film and television. He appeared in Sylvester Stallone's Paradise Alley in 1978, and later took roles in Over the Top in 1987, and most notably in Roadhouse alongside Patrick Swayze in 1989. Funk also appeared in the short-lived television western Wild Side in 1985, and choreographed the street fight at the climax of Rocky V. his name appearing in the end credits. He had genuine talent as an actor and stunt performer, and if wrestling had not pulled him back, he might have carved out a respectable career in Hollywood. But wrestling always pulled him back. In 1985, Terry and Dory signed with the World Wrestling Federation, arriving under the management of Jimmy Hart and carrying Terry's signature branding iron to the ring. The Funks were brought in as heels during the height of the rock and wrestling era, a period dominated by colorful characters and larger-than-life personalities. Terry fit right in with his wild-eyed intensity and his willingness to attack opponents with the branding iron before or after the bell. He feuded with the Junkyard Dog and challenged Hulk Hogan for the World Wrestling Federation Championship on multiple occasions during house shows, delivering the kind of intense, old-school brawling performances that made audiences genuinely hate him. The Funks competed on the WrestleMania 2 card in 1986, defeating the team of Tito Santana and the Junkyard Dog during the Los Angeles Memorial Sports Arena segment by using Jimmy Hart's megaphone as a weapon. They were later joined by a masked wrestler billed as Jimmy Jack Funk, supposedly their younger, more unstable brother. However, the grueling World Wrestling Federation schedule proved difficult for Terry, and he left the promotion in April 1986 after only about a year with the company. Then came the moment that reignited Terry Funk's career and produced one of the greatest feuds in wrestling history. In May 1989, Funk appeared in World Championship Wrestling at Wrestle War 1989. Ric Flair had just defeated Ricky Steamboat in the third and final match of their legendary trilogy to recapture the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. The match was judged by 3 former NWA champions, Lou Thesz, Pat O'Connor, and Terry Funk. After Flair's victory, Funk entered the ring to congratulate the new champion and requested a title shot. Flair, in a moment that would change both men's careers, dismissed the challenge, telling Funk that he had been inactive and spending time in Hollywood rather than wrestling. What happened next became one of the most iconic angles in wrestling history. Funk snapped. He attacked Flair with a barrage of punches, dragged him outside the ring, and pile-drove him through a ringside table. Flair's neck bent at a sickening angle, and while the champion lay motionless amid the wreckage, Funk screamed about being disrespected. The pile-driver through the table was a revolutionary moment. This was years before tables became a staple of professional wrestling. Terry Funk essentially invented the table spot that would later become one of the most common weapons in the business. The feud that followed was named the Wrestling Observer newsletter's Feud of the Year for 1989, and Pro Wrestling Illustrated's Feud of the Year as well. Funk formed the J-Tex Corporation with manager Gary Hart, the Great Muta, Dick Slater, Buzz Sawyer, and the Dragon Master, creating a villainous faction that terrorized WCW. The name was a reference to its 2 most prominent members, Funk from Texas and Muta from Japan. His promos during this period were among the best of his career, mixing genuine menace with an unhinged quality that made audiences believe he might do literally anything at any moment. He brought out a scrawny Ric Flair impersonator with a yellow stripe painted down his back, mocking the champion in a way that legitimately infuriated Flair behind the scenes. He tried to suffocate Flair with a plastic bag during one encounter. He was, in every sense, a man who had lost his mind over being told he was not good enough. What made the Flair versus Funk feud so compelling was the contrast between the 2 men. Flair was the polished champion, the limousine-riding, jet-flying nature boy who represented the establishment of professional wrestling. Funk was the aging outsider, the man from the past who refused to accept that his time had come and gone. Their rivalry was not just about a championship, it was about pride, about legacy, about a man's desperate need to prove that he still mattered. And Terry Funk played that desperation with such raw, unhinged authenticity that it elevated the entire feud beyond anything a traditional wrestling angle could achieve. Flair and Funk first met at the Great American Bash on July the 23rd, 1989 in Baltimore, where Flair retained the NWA World Championship by reversing Funk's inside cradle into a pin of his own. After the match, Gary Hart and the Great Muta attacked Flair, with Sting coming to the champion's rescue, setting the stage for an even more intense continuation of the rivalry. Funk and Flair continued to battle through the fall, with Funk escalating the violence at every turn, including the infamous incident at Clash of the Champions 8, where he wrapped a plastic bag around Flair's head in a terrifying attempt to suffocate him on national television. Their feud culminated at the Clash of the Champions 9 on November the 15th, 1989 in Troy, New York, in an I Quit match that is widely regarded as one of the greatest matches in professional wrestling history. The stipulation stated that the loser would have to retire, raising the stakes to the absolute highest level. The match was a brutal, emotional war, with both men using piledrivers, tables, and every weapon they could find. Flair ultimately won when Funk screamed that he quit while trapped in the figure-4 leg lock. After the match, in a moment of mutual respect that brought tears to the eyes of everyone watching, the two former enemies acknowledged each other and shook hands, bringing a perfect end to a perfect feud. The clash drew an impressive 4.9 rating on TBS, proving that old-school storytelling could still captivate a television audience. After leaving WCW, Funk could have ridden off into the sunset on the strength of the Flair feud alone. Instead, he reinvented himself entirely. In 1993, Funk appeared in Eastern Championship Wrestling, the small Philadelphia-based promotion that was about to transform into ECW under Paul Heyman's guidance. Funk saw something in ECW that the rest of the wrestling world had not yet recognized, a promotion willing to push the boundaries of what professional wrestling could be. He lent his name, his credibility, and his willingness to bleed to the upstart company, helping to legitimize it in the eyes of fans and wrestlers alike. For a company trying to establish itself as a serious alternative to the World Wrestling Federation and WCW, having a former NWA World Champion on the roster was invaluable. Funk brought instant credibility and showed the younger wrestlers on the ECW roster what it meant to truly sacrifice everything for a match. On July 16, 1994, Terry and Dory lost a barbed wire match to the Public Enemy. It was one of the early signature violent encounters that helped define ECW's identity. Funk maintained a regular schedule with the promotion while simultaneously competing in Japan, burning the candle at both ends in a way that would have destroyed a younger man. His ECW career was remarkable. He feuded with Shane Douglas, the Sandman, Sabu, Cactus Jack, and his own protege, Tommy Dreamer, a young wrestler whom Funk took under his wing and mentored into becoming the heart and soul of ECW. He won the ECW Television Championship and became one of the cornerstones of the promotion's early identity, proving that extreme wrestling was not just about blood and weapons, but about storytelling, emotion, and the willingness to push yourself beyond your limits. But it was his work in Japan during this same period that pushed him into the most extreme chapter of his career. On August 20, 1995, Terry Funk competed in the IWA Japan King of the Deathmatch tournament in Kawasaki. The tournament featured some of the most violent and dangerous matches ever conceived, with barbed wire, fire, explosives, and broken glass all serving as weapons. These were not theatrical props or carefully controlled stunts. The barbed wire was real. The explosions were real. The blood was very, very real. Funk was 51 years old, competing against men half his age in matches that could have killed him. And he did it because that was who Terry Funk was. He did not know how to say no to a challenge. He fought his way to the finals, where he faced Cactus Jack in a no-rope barbed wire exploding, barbed wire board exploding ring time bomb deathmatch. Yes, that was the actual name. Funk lost the finals, but the footage of the tournament became legendary, circulating on bootleg tapes and eventually online, inspiring an entire generation of hardcore wrestlers and establishing Funk as the godfather of deathmatch wrestling. The images of a bloody, exhausted Terry Funk tangled in barbed wire in a Japanese gymnasium became some of the most iconic in wrestling history. On April 13, 1997, Funk headlined ECW's first pay-per-view, Barely Legal, defeating Raven to capture the ECW World Heavyweight Championship at the age of 52. It was a coronation moment for both Funk and the promotion, proving that ECW could deliver pay-per-view events and that Terry Funk could still go at an age when most wrestlers were long retired. He lost the title to Sabu at Born to be Wired in a barbed wire match so violent that both men had to be physically cut free from the wire at the end, and Sabu suffered a visible bicep tear during the bout. That September, a show called WrestleFest, 50 Years of Funk, was held in Funk's hometown of Amarillo. It celebrated the careers of Terry, his father, and his brother. Before the main event, in which Terry lost to then World Wrestling Federation champion Bret Hart in a non-title match, Paul Heyman presented Funk with a special belt. The belt had been paid for through a collection taken up by the wrestlers on the ECW roster, and it declared him the lifetime ECW World Heavyweight Champion. It was one of the most touching moments in wrestling history. A genuine expression of love and gratitude from a locker room that knew it owed so much to the old man from Texas. In January 1997, Funk returned to the World Wrestling Federation, this time adopting the persona of Chainsaw Charlie, a masked character who carried a chainsaw to the ring and wore pantyhose over his face. It was an absurd gimmick for a man of Funk's stature, but he made it work through sheer force of personality and a willingness to embrace the comedy of a 53-year-old man doing things that no 53-year-old man should be doing. He had appeared on Shotgun Saturday Night earlier that month, cutting a wild promo that included calling the interviewers mother names and Vince McMahon a Yankee bastard before getting into a brawl with Stone Cold Steve Austin. It was vintage Terry Funk, chaotic and unpredictable and absolutely electric. He teamed with Cactus Jack, who was now performing as Mankind and later as Dude Love. And together they captured the World Wrestling Federation World Tag Team Championship. The sight of Terry Funk and Mick Foley, mentor and student, holding tag team gold together in the World Wrestling Federation was a heartwarming moment for anyone who understood their history. Funk competed at WrestleMania 14 and remained with the World Wrestling Federation through early 1998 before departing once again. Funk returned to WCW in 2000 at age 55, and remarkably, he was still competing for championships. He won the WCW United States Heavyweight Championship and the WCW Hardcore Championship 3 times, setting the company record for most hardcore title reigns. He briefly served as WCW Commissioner and led a faction called the Old Age Outlaws alongside Arn Anderson, Larry Zbyszko, and Paul Orndorff, that feuded with the New World Order. From 2002 to 2004, Funk worked as a top star for Ring of Honor and Major League Wrestling, feuding with the likes of CM Punk and Steve Corino in death matches and specialty bouts that proved the old man still had plenty left in the tank. In ROH, Funk was treated with the reverence he deserved, and the younger wrestlers on the roster viewed working with him as an honor and an education. His last major appearance on a national stage came at ECW One Night Stand in 2006, where he teamed with Tommy Dreamer and Beulah McGillicuddy against Mick Foley, Edge, and Lita in a match that saw flaming tables and all the extreme brutality that ECW had become famous for. He was 61 years old and still throwing himself into flaming tables. Most men that age are thinking about retirement plans and grandchildren. Terry Funk was thinking about his next bump. Outside of wrestling, Terry Funk married his wife, Vicky Ann, on August 14, 1965. The two remained together for over 53 years, until her passing on March 29, 2019. Together, they had 2 daughters. Their marriage was one of the rare constants in a life defined by chaos, travel, and physical punishment. Terry Funk's influence on professional wrestling cannot be overstated. He was the bridge between eras, the man who connected the traditional NWA Championship wrestling of the 1970s to the extreme, boundary-pushing style of the 1990s and beyond. He inspired Mick Foley, who has consistently credited Funk as the most important influence on his career. He helped build ECW from nothing into a promotion that changed the entire industry. He pioneered the use of tables as weapons, helped popularize barbed wire matches in the Western world, and proved that a wrestler could reinvent himself at any age if he had the talent and the willingness to suffer. Funk was inducted into more halls of fame than perhaps any other wrestler in history. He entered the WCW Hall of Fame in 1995, the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame in 1996, the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame in 2004, the Hardcore Hall of Fame in 2005, the NWA Hall of Fame in 2009, and the WWE Hall of Fame in 2009, where he and Dory were inducted together by their lifelong friend Dusty Rhodes. In his later years, Funk's health declined significantly. The decades of punishment, the barbed wire, the fire, the unprotected chair shots, the bumps on concrete, the explosions, the falls through tables, all of it took its toll on a body that had been asked to endure more than any human being should ever have to endure. Funk was diagnosed with dementia and eventually moved into an assisted living facility. His once sharp mind had been ravaged by the cumulative damage of a career that asked too much of the human body for too long. The man who had once been able to captivate an arena of 20,000 people with nothing but a microphone, and his words could no longer recognize the faces of people who loved him. It was a heartbreaking end for a man who had given everything he had to the business he loved, and it served as a devastating reminder of the price that professional wrestling extracts from those who dedicate their lives to it. Their daughters cared for Terry in his final years, doing their best to ensure that the man who had spent his entire life giving everything to others was given the dignity and comfort he deserved in return. Terry Funk passed away on August 23, 2023 at the age of 79. The news of his death brought an outpouring of grief from every corner of the wrestling world. Wrestlers from every era, every promotion, and every style mourned the loss of a man who had touched all of their lives in some way. From young independent wrestlers who had grown up watching his deathmatch footage on grainy bootleg tapes to legends like Ric Flair and Mick Foley who had shared the ring with him in some of the most memorable matches ever contested. The response was universal. Terry Funk was loved, truly, deeply, universally loved. He was not just a wrestler. He was the embodiment of what it meant to love professional wrestling so deeply that you would sacrifice your body, your health, and your peace of mind just to hear one more crowd, take one more bump, and feel one more rush of adrenaline. He retired a dozen times and came back every single time. He held world championships across 3 decades. He main evented in arenas from Madison Square Garden to Korakuen Hall to the ECW Arena in South Philadelphia. He was a cowboy, a world champion, a Hollywood actor, a deathmatch legend, and a chainsaw Charlie. Above all else, he was a man who simply could not stop being Terry Funk. Drop a comment below and tell us your favorite Terry Funk moment. Was it the NWA World Championship reign, the Flair piledriver, or the death matches in Japan? We want to hear from you. Until next time.